Hello, people of the internet. Today we're going to be building a very simple application, a Hello World application. Now, before you leave, because you're like, that is just way too simple, I've done this before, get ready for this. This will be the most over-engineered Hello World application I have ever built. So we're going to be using a bunch of really crazy packages here to do something that is going to teach you a lot, I think, about Flutter and Dart, without getting in the nitty gritty of, making it themed to a Pokemon Pokedex sort of thing like I've done before, or a Lord of the Rings thing, or et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be a Hello World, but it has a pretty fun twist in it. And the cool thing is we are using a bunch of really good packages that are good for any, large scalable Flutter application. So to get started, I've just started a fresh Flutter project. I've done nothing. It's open. It's ready to go. And we'll start by getting these magical packages I speak about. So we're going to open up our pubspec.yaml. And I'm going to put these in and talk about each of them. So in just our normal dependencies right here, we're going to be using riverpod. We're going to use the Flutter riverpod package since this is a Flutter app. That'll be for our state management. We're also going to be using riverpod annotation, which allows us to essentially generate code based on a riverpod provider without having to write all the annoying boilerplate. We're going to be using fpdart for functional programming. Now, last time I mentioned this project, I had a lot of comments saying, like, what about darts? Darts with a Z or a Z if you're like me in Canada. And that package just is not maintained as recently. It's like 2 years old in terms of its last, change, and fpdart's a little more active. Essentially, they are the same thing. If you are using darts, everything we're going to do here, if you chose to follow along, will still probably apply, maybe just with some minor syntax changes. We're going to use DO for networking instead of just the basic HTTP one. I love DO. It does everything I need. Freezed annotation, because we are going to be using freeze, which is going to be a dev dependency, so I haven't got to it yet. But freezed is basically a way we can define our data models and do all the stuff for converting it to JSON and back, as well as copy widths and checking for comparisons on them. And it's a great, great package. I use it on everything. JSON annotation is kind of part of that. It just works with freezed really well. And we're going to have URL launcher because this application, although just a Hello World app, will actually open a URL, and you'll see why in a little bit. And cache network image, because similarly, we're going to be showing an image in our Hello World application for some strange reason, and we'll get to that too. So I have those packages there. And we also need some dev dependencies here. So I'm going to put them right here under Flutter test. And we will have, we don't need Flutter lints because it's already here, but riverpod generator. That allows us to generate the code. Build runner, that's so we can just generate code in general for both riverpod and freeze. JSON serializable, that is going to work with our freezed and freezed annotation, and all these things go well together. And of course, freezed, which if you've never used before, you'll see why it's great in a bit. So we'll just save that, and hopefully this will just automatically run all of our lovely things. Okay, we have all of our packages. So let's go to our lib and we'll go to our main.dart. And as usual, we will erase the sample application here. We'll still keep our my app, and we'll just get rid of some of this code here. And we'll get rid of this. And for now, just put a scaffold. Sure. And we will put a const here so it doesn't complain. And we'll save this file. Before I start this up, though, I'm going to open up our debug profile entitlements because I'm going to be building to Mac. I just like working on the Mac version because it's just a bit more efficient to my CPU, especially if I'm recording than using like the iOS simulator. But everything we're doing here can work on every platform that Flutter allows. So we're just adding this to allow Mac to talk to the network because for some reason our Hello World application needs to make a network request. I know, it's over-engineered. Okay, so we have that. So we can actually build this now. So we'll make sure we have Mac set and many ways to build, but we'll just hit the run button here. All right, start it up, good to go. And, in some ways we could say we're done because I do say the word hello world right here, but there's not a space or a comma, so it's not really proper. Also, let's get rid of this, which is my favorite thing to do. And we can just go debug false. I don't have a need for that. Okay, so let's start over engineering here. So I'm going to go into my lib folder, and we're going to make a new directory, make dir src, and we'll go into that as well. You can, of course, just be doing this, right in VS Code by going new folders and stuff, but I like to use the terminal whenever it makes sense. We're also going to make a directory now called feature, which is where all of our features will go. And for this app, although it's over-engineered, we're only going to have one feature. It's just going to be called hello. So we'll go in that directory too. So we're now right inside hello, and I'm going to make a bunch of folders. So we're going to go make dir, and we're going to make screens, components, providers, services, and models. And this is just a pattern I like to kind of keep everything within this feature. You also break it down into these places, so you don't just have a whole bunch of files in unorganized places. We'll start by making a screen. So we're just going to call this hello screen.dart. And we'll just do a stateless component, stateless widget called hello screen. So now what we can actually do here is return a scaffold just like that, and go back to our main.dart and actually return hello screen. And if we save that, we should see no differences because we're ultimately doing the same thing. We're just returning it with one extra build in the middle. Okay, so there's our lovely screen. Now in this scaffold, we're actually going to want to have a few different things here. We're going to want to have an app bar. And we'll give it just a title. And it's going to be text, but it's not going to say hello world because then we would just be done. So we're actually going to say it welcome. And we'll make this a const just so it doesn't complain. And eventually we'll be adding some actions. And actually I'll stub it in now. So we'll have actions. And we'll actually put an icon button here. It won't do anything yet, but it will be there for future us. And it will just be a refresh icon because we might want to refresh our hello world for some reason. So now if we go back, we actually see the welcome and we have this lovely button that doesn't do anything, but it's there. Then in the body, we are going to create a component for this. So we're going to call this hello container. Hello container. And yeah, placeholder is totally fine for now. So let's just do that. So I do like to keep my screens, for the most part, pretty minimal in terms of UI, where, the body of your screen a lot of the time is, another component. And I realized that's the problem. Hello container would have had some weird recursive thing there. So now we actually see the placeholder from there. So let's get into the nitty gritty here of what we really want to do. So we're going to start kind of at the top of, I guess, the chain, if you will. And we're going to start in our services. So we're going to make a service, and I'm going to call it Wiki service. Because what this service is meant to do is it's actually going to go out and use the Wikipedia API, which is a very open, easy to use API. And it's going to pull a random article, which from there, we are going to try and find the word hello world within its excerpt and display it on the screen along with some other cool things. But by going through this process, you're going to see a lot of really cool patterns and stuff with the packages that I've been talking about. So for our Wiki service, this is just going to be a basic class. We'll call it Wiki service. Doesn't need to extend anything in this case, although if you really wanted to over-engineer it, you could. And we're going to start by allowing our service to just get values, get data from the API. So we'll just call this get for now, and we will be labeling it with, it's what it returns and stuff in a moment, but I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. And the get is going to allow us to, first of all, pass in a string. That'll be a required parameter, so we won't have it in brackets, but maybe we might also want our further down the track API to be able to be like, I want to pass in some parameters. So we may also allow map string dynamic params, and we'll set this to a default of a const of just an empty map. So if nothing's passed in, it will still conform to this, and then we don't have to worry about it being null in any cases. And this will actually be async because it's going to be making a network request. And what we're going to do in here is we're going to put a try catch loop here. And right inside our try, we're going to create something called response, and we're going to await. And here's where we're going to use do. I believe our first package of the day. So do is good for doing network requests, and we can basically go and get a URL, or in this case, a path, which is what we're going to pass in here. Now, what I need to do, because if we just pass in a path of something without like an HTTPS and stuff, it's going to throw an error. And this service, no matter what endpoint we hit, no matter what path we're using, we always want to use a certain base URL. And in this case, the base URL for our Wiki service is actually wikipedia.org there. So this will go, it'll basically take this as the base and add whatever path we ask it to, and it will end up calling it and giving us back a response. Now, our response could have various things. So what I want to do is actually from here, we're going to switch through the response.status code. And status code, we're looking for 200. That usually means something works. And for this case, that's all we're going to check. But you could check, if it was a 201, which is usually when something was created, or a 204, that there was no content, or, a 404, it was not found, that kind of thing. But we're going to do a switch statement here where we can actually take 200 as one of the options, and we'll do something here in a minute. I'll just do to do. And then in any case that it doesn't match, basically the default, we can do this, and we can do something else here to do. Now, what do we actually want to return from here? So we could just return, a map string dynamic of the response data, and that's totally fine. However, things with network requests and lots of things in programming, things can go wrong along the way, especially when you're working with someone else's data. And when we're working with an API, we're definitely working with someone else's data. Even if we built that API, it could get lost in transit. So many things could go wrong. And that's where our second package is going to come in, which is called fpdart. And this allows us to actually, tell Dart, hey, two different things can return from this. So first of all, it is going to be a future. We know that, because it's async already. So it's definitely a future. But what is the future? And we're going to actually do an either. And in this, we have to import. So we import fpdart here. And what we want to do is have two different options. Now, usually the practice is the first option will kind of be like when something goes wrong. And the second option is when something goes right. So our first option, we're just going to say string, because we'll actually put an error message in there when something went wrong. Otherwise, for now, we're just going to make this dynamic. We might update this later. But the cool thing about this, so you have your left and you have your right. And then what we can do here is, if we got a 200 code, we're actually going to return, and we use this function called write. Write is part of the fpdart package. And that way it knows the code later that it was a success versus a fail. And here we'll actually do a write return of response.data. Now, if something went wrong, meaning we didn't get a 200 status code, we can return a left in that case, and we can just put the word error, and then we can actually take the response.status code just so we can say, what kind of error it was. Missing a comma here, but other than that, and the semicolon, I think we are good. Let's just make that nicer. Now, also in our catch, which means something else went wrong that wasn't really, maybe this whole thing wasn't found. Something else totally went wrong before it could even get to this point. Here, we can actually just return left of E, and we'll just do error.toString. So we'll just return whatever that error is. It could be, a Dart error. It could be a lot of different things. So there, we have this very basic way to make a GET request. Now, we want to do something that's going to actually implement, because we can actually make this private. We don't actually want anything outside of our application to necessarily call this, outside of this file rather. But we're going to make another function called retrieve random. And actually, we'll call it retrieve random article, just to make it very specific. And this will be async. And what we want to do here is we'll get our response, but to do this, all we have to do is go await and then call our get function within here and pass in a specific path. Now, what we want to pass in is API REST v1 page random summary. And that's just one that I found that will work. And what this basically looks like is when you hit the random one, it will spit back a random article JSON data for you. Note that this is, I have a Chrome extension. It really would look like this. But basically you can kind of see like the data is coming back on JSON, and it'll give me a random one each time I hit this. So that's going to allow us to do what my vision for this is. And then right here, what we can do is we can, because remember this response, it could be a string or it could be dynamic. So in order to handle this in both of those cases, we actually take our response and we fold it. So fold will give us two arguments here. One is the left. So we can actually call this error because we know that's what it's going to be. And here we can actually just do something with that. And then this would be actually the, JSON that came back, and we'd want to do something with that too, which we will do in a moment. Let's mark this correctly though, future either, and in this case, we'll do string and we'll do dynamic again. But we will be updating this shortly because we never want to use dynamic. That is, not safe. I mean, there's cases we have to use it. Like here, really, we probably will need it because different things can respond different ways. We'll probably change it to a map string dynamic, but this will become actually a model that we're going to make. Speaking of, let's make that model before we get too far ahead of ourselves. So I'm just going to actually fully comment this just so we don't have any errors. And we'll come back to this when we have our model.